No, it's not an historic milestone. What it is an amelioration of a problem that President Trump has created in the first place. There was not a problem with tariffs that could be solved overnight, and for President Trump to say, well, we have 50% tariffs out of the blue, really, is extremely unfortunate. India has done well in terms of trying to work through kinds of details, but you will notice that on the India side, even as to today, February 6th, India is talking about really reaching some agreement in a couple of months. Well, I think the timeline is really completely out of the usual way in which great trading partners reach agreements. The standard way in which to do this is to work out details first, which takes more than a year to work out the details. And then when those details are worked out, to have a joint statement saying that this is the agreement. This is not the Trump style, obviously. The style is to announce something which may or may not be reality, and then to try to cram into the framework, if you will, which has been set, a set of standards which bring about a real agreement. So the timeline here, India has done well in terms of trying to work through kinds of details, but you will notice that on the India side, even as to today, February 6th, India is talking about really reaching some agreement in a couple of months. And that would be a more usual way in which trade agreements work. And as I say, it has not been the style of President Trump. And it remains to be seen whether or not there can be a sufficiently logical and deliberate process which will stand the test of time. You know, it's one thing to go on social media and say something. It's quite another thing to have an agreement which is operationally sufficient so that you have something which lasts more than for the immediate transaction. The whole problem here with the Trump administration is, rather than trying to look at building the relationship between U.S. and India, is to try to have a transaction to push these very complicated trade matters into a framework which is not one which necessarily stands the test of time. And I think that the business of issuing an executive order now about Russian oil exemplifies this. President Trump said that Prime Minister Modi had agreed to stop buying Russian oil. Well, the relationship between Russia and India is not one which is going to be discarded overnight in regard to Russia or any other matter. Nevertheless, there is a great need for these two great democracies, and the U.S. and India, to be able to cooperate on Russian oil, which of course is key to what happens about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So in regard to timeline, this is an unusual way to approach it. India has done better than most other nations in trying to have a logical and deliberate process rather than succumb to the chaos which President Trump favors to be able to have transactions in which he can claim victory. No, it's not an historic milestone. What it is an amelioration of a problem that President Trump has created in the first place. There was not a problem with tariffs that could be solved overnight, and for President Trump to say, well, we have 50% tariffs out of the blue, really, is extremely unfortunate. And then if you say, well, we've cut the 50% down to 18%, that's not really an historic milestone, except to say that rather than completely destroying the economic engagement between the U.S. and India, we've been able to work around a very serious problem. But as far as opening up a huge new era, the United States-India trade and investment relationship has been on a steady uphill path for the last 30 years. There have been some dips in that, but the trend has been upward. And that trend was sent downward by the imposition first of the so-called reciprocal tariffs, and then the sanction tariff of an additional 25% on top of the 25% reciprocal tariff. And of course, reciprocal is completely a misnomer. There's nothing reciprocal about this. It is really some sort of back-of-the-envelope calculation, which has been done by Trump advisors based upon a trade deficit. A trade deficit is not necessarily a bad thing, and it certainly is not an indication of the health of the relationship between two trading partners. It has to do with a number of economic factors. So to say that you have entered a new era because you have ameliorated a problem which you have created, it seems to me to be completely wrong. Well, thanks very much for allowing me to comment on this. My take is that this is a framework. It is not an agreement. It is not the deal which was announced by President Trump. Nevertheless, there are elements here which going forward can help to bridge some of the discontinuities which have been really very harmful to the U.S.-India relationship over the past year. These two democracies, India and the U.S., are the largest in the world, and I would argue they're the greatest. And they are joined at the hip, both economically and strategically. And the deal is part of what happens strategically on a wide range of issues. So it's good that there is something which has been put forward in a joint statement, and I think that there is a parallel executive order on the Russian oil. But this is not the deal which was announced. The announcement that President Trump had made had talked about there would be zero tariffs from the India side, had talked about $500 billion in goods to be purchased. It turns out that that's really aspirational over a period of 5 years, rather than something which is going to happen immediately. India has not agreed to reduce all of its tariff barriers to zero, which was represented. So yes, it's a great thing that India and the U.S. seem to be working around this problem, which was really created in the first place by President Trump. You know, tariffs were only on the average 2.5% before the announcement of the 50% tariffs. So now they're down to 18%. Well, that's still, 7-8 times what they were before this started. So that having been said, there is a long way to go. I think that India is doing a great job of not succumbing to the tweets or the social media pronouncements, and taking a rational and logical approach to this so that this extremely important relationship between the U.S. and India can resume the upward path which it has had for the last